Welcome to the Code 4 Couples podcast, focusing on topics for law enforcement officers and couples to keep you and your relationship connected, resilient, and Code 4. Now, your host, law enforcement expert Cyndi Doyle, author of Hold the Line, and my wife.
Hey there, and welcome back to Code 4 Couples. I'm your host, Cyndi Doyle, a licensed professional counselor, author of Hold the Line, and law enforcement officer wife retired. Today, I have on Dr. Benjamin Stone, who is an internationally recognized speaker and thought leader with over 20 years experience, inspiring audiences around the world. He is a really dynamic presenter and known for his compelling storytelling and unmatched expertise. But that's not why I have him in. Why I have him on is because in 2015, Dr. Stone co-founded Sigma Tactical Wellness, where he served as CEO until its acquisition by Telemed2U in 2025. I did not know that, so thank you for sharing that. Sigma Tactical has become a national authority in advanced cardiac disease prevention for first responders, which some of you know that is near and dear to my heart. It has developed innovative research and screening protocols that have saved countless lives of police and fire agencies across the U.S. He has spoken at FBI, NAA, IACP, and numerous state associations and conferences. He is just passionate about making sure our first responders stay healthy in regard to their heart disease. So, Dr. Stone, thank you so much for being on here today, because I am excited to have this conversation, and I'm just going to let you know up front, there may be tears shed. And you're like, I don't know why, but you will soon. So thank you. Did I miss anything on your bio?
You didn't at all. You didn't miss a thing. And I really appreciate that. And I'll clarify a couple of things there as well. You said this is a conversation looking forward to having. This is a conversation we need to be having based on what we're seeing out there in the medical ether with respect to the number of casualties from cardiac disease and law enforcement. And not only just the amount, but the age at which it happens is also something that's very poorly understood.
Yes. And that is something that let's just start there, because here's where I think I ran into you / your team actually at an IACP conference in Dallas. I was presenting there, and I think you were presenting when I went by the booth. And the reason, this is where I'm going to get teary. The reason why I went by the booth was because September 1st of that year, my husband, who was 57, had a widowmaker heart attack and survived.
Wow.
We were in shock. So this was September. I think the conference was in October. So we are still, like, I got goosebumps. We are still in recovery as a couple, as an individual. He is still trying to learn how to trust himself again. It was at that booth that they said, oh, the average age for law enforcement is 57. And I turned and looked at him and I went, babe, you're just a damn statistic. Like you're like the poster child for heart issues. Yeah. So tell us about some of the stats with law enforcement, heart disease, the problems, because there's a lot I can unpack here, but I also know we have a time limit. So, and so does everybody else listening.
And trust me, you give a PhD the microphone and you're liable to never get it back again. Just understand that. The most pleasing sound in the world is the sound of my own voice, Cyndi.
It's great.
Be careful. But yeah, we see this. So back in the early 2000s, there was a study that was conducted by a gentleman named John Violani. And John Violani is the godfather of public safety epidemiology and has really done some groundbreaking research in all-cause mortality studies, life expectancy studies, etc., and has really shed a lot of light on the chief cause of death in members of public safety, specifically in law enforcement, before civilian life expectancy at 79 to 80 years of age. So right now, we're looking at a 22-year discrepancy in life expectancy between civilians and members of public safety, namely law enforcement. The sole cause of death really oscillates back and forth between self-harm incidents, suicide, and of course, heart disease. Now, the thing with heart disease that really I think is astonishing is that as bad as it is in terms of the number of deaths that we see out there in the public safety space, we only know about 6% of them. You know, so a lot of these are happening at home. off
Yep.
on a spouse.
Retired. My husband
Retired?
had been retired for 1 year
Yeah.
and had his heart attack.
We had a circumstance at Austin PD last year. We had a couple of officers that retired early in the year, both died of a cardiovascular disease, June, July. This is
Yeah.
something we see is becoming epidemic. And now, obviously, the cause, everyone says stress. Well, yes and no. Stress
More
affects us
to
all
it.
differently. Right. And not only that, but there's all different types of stress. It impacts us in ways that we can't necessarily quantify. But a lot of this has to do with obesity. We see a 46 to 48% obesity rate amongst law enforcement. 71% of members in the fire service are overweight. So it really kickstarts just the process of plaque development through the vehicle of diabetes. We see 30% of our population are undiagnosed diabetics, which is very inflammatory, can really kickstart those processes of plaque development without us knowing. But the real issue that we see out there is that cops don't follow the traditional routes of developing cardiac disease. We see this developing in fit-looking men and women
Yep.
at age 30, more so than we do in the civilian population. And I can go on and on about this, but it's something we're seeing get continually worse. And I've got a lot of studies and statistics that I could cite here. I don't want to commandeer the conversation, but it's a very complex problem, it's a very complex solution, but it's something that we're passionate about. And we're seeing a significant change in culture out there in terms of identification.
I think that when I think about my husband's journey and what happened, like he was not overweight as far as weight goes, but he was diagnosed with high blood pressure and he was diagnosed with the cortisol aspect, which I know is a indicator, but his doctor just put him on high blood pressure medication. And that was it. Kick it down the road.
Yeah.
When you're looking at officers or first responders that are fit, that are taking care of themselves, that are watching what they eat, because we know as a community and in spouses too, we all know that this is something to be aware of. In fact, I'm getting a little off track, but I think, in fact, there's actually legislation out there now where there's a pool of money that if we could prove that it was connected to the job, that there's financial assistance or a payoff, if you will. We don't want that. What's the medical aspect, I'm going to say it that way, that contribute to law enforcement and first responders moving past the overweight, the diabetes? If you look at people that are fit, what's going on there that increases their risk?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a lot of things. I think sleep, interrupted sleep, stress, injury, coping mechanisms, alcohol, tobacco, now stimulants, caffeine, etc. Energy drinks are mainstream. So it's so many things involved. The problem that we see out there wholesale, Cyndi, is that we're treating cops like civilians in the medical space.
Yep.
They don't present with the same types of manifestations at the same age that we see in civilian population, as evidenced by the mortality studies. Right now, the average age for a heart attack in the civilian side is 65. In law enforcement, it's 46 and falling. And that's technical data. So it's obviously not going to get any better. Obviously, it's getting worse. But the thing that we really didn't understand is there's been data out there, Cyndi, that has shown us that law enforcement officers develop heart disease at rates that are much higher than civilians. We've known that for a while, right? And we usually see it being developed at younger ages. But the one thing that we didn't know is that they're developing it absent of the clinical markers that are associated with heart disease. And that's the stuff that we learned in 6th grade health class. That's the stuff that hypertension, Framingham risk score, okay, which is
The what?
Exactly, okay. It's the FRA or FRS, and I'll explain to you exactly what that is, because this is really things start to go south for us, okay? And I don't say south for us because, I say south for cops.
Yes.
A Framingham risk score is what we consider traditional risk analysis, traditional risk analysis. And basically, it's a summation of all different types of items, right? Weight obviously is an issue. We classically have seen this more in male populations than female. It doesn't necessarily appear to be the case anymore. Obviously, hypertension is involved in it. LDL cholesterol habits, obviously, whether you smoke or drink, exercise, etc. And then we typically would see this more in Hispanic and African American populations. That doesn't appear to be the case anymore. So it's been updated a number of times since 1975 when it was developed, but this is still 50-year-old data, okay? And it's not based on occupation, right? It's just based on civilians, right?
Right.
So the point I'm trying to make is that do law enforcement officers, is the Framingham risk score actually effective in determining risk. Can you take a patient and look at basic lipid panel, HDL, LDL, triglycerides, etc., total cholesterol, and use that to any degree of accuracy to determine a cardiac risk like you can in civilians, right? And now, what is a Framingham risk score in terms of actually the risk analysis? So for instance, if you have a low to intermediate Framingham risk score, that means you have a less than a 10% chance of having a heart attack in the next.
Okay.
Okay. So that's
Wow.
good. So if somebody
Mhm.
comes to you with normal, let's say a cop comes to you with normal cholesterol and a six pack, and good habits, doesn't smoke or drink, that patient's going to be scored very low in terms of cardiac risk incidence over the next decade. And that makes sense, right? See, the problem is at that point is if they want additional, like more scrupulous care or diagnostics to really get down to the nitty gritty as to whether or not that plaque development present, the insurance carriers don't cover that because they don't qualify for it because there's no medical necessity. There's no precedent.
Yes.
And
Got
so
it.
basically they're ushered out the door 2 minutes and 34 seconds later, or whatever the length of the average primary care visit is. Okay. We see a significant number of those individuals presenting with heart disease and potentially bad outcomes in terms of the development of a heart attack. Okay. Now, let me back up a little bit. So plaque development, and this is where my chief medical officer, Dr. John Scheinberg, who's the other founder of Cigna Tactical Wellness, could really come in and give a lot of detail here. But I'm going to summarize this for everyone who doesn't speak cardiology.
All of us lay people.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I'm myself included, right? It's very simple. And that's the reason I like the heart, Cyndi. It's like a house. It's you got plumbing problems, you got electrical problems. And it's very rare that your electrical problems cause plumbing problems and vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's the way I tend to look at it. But plaque development is, I would say, poorly understood from the lay perspective. And what I mean by that is we've always been told that plaque develops on the insides of coronary vessels, left anterior descending a widowmaker, right?
Yes.
Like scaling on the inside of PVC. And that
Okay.
doesn't happen. And furthermore, it doesn't appear to be linked to cholesterol at all. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. And so when you think about what's actually happening on the insides of those vessels, there's a little thin layer of tissue, and that's called vascular endothelium or endothelial tissue, whatever you want to call it. But you can think of it almost like Teflon in a skillet.
Okay.
That Teflon's intact. You can cook it right. Nothing sticks.
Yes.
Okay? Now, if you take that skillet or, cooking surface and put it in the dishwasher and it beats against pots and pans and obviously damages the Teflon layer, the next time you cook scrambled eggs in it, you're going to have food residue where the Teflon's
bad.
which you have to physically remove.
Yes.
Okay? The same thing happens on the insides of those vessels, Cyndi, except it's not physical damage that does it. It's chemical damage. It's oxidative damage from uncontrolled diabetes or smoking or alcohol or stress or a combined amalgam of circumstances, a lot of which we find baked into the cake of the professional law enforcement. So now you have an area along the longitudinal axis of that vessel where that little tissue layer is damaged. It's a lesion. And that's where things start to go south, because here's the deal. It's not about the amount of cholesterol present. It's about the conditions for plaque development. That's what will determine whether you produce plaque. We will see plaque development in fit young officers with perfect cholesterol.
Yep.
Okay. These are individuals that would have literally slipped through the cracks of basic health care because of their presentation. It doesn't take into consideration what they do for a living or how long they've been doing it. And so we see these individuals all day that have great circumstances and presentation, and there's plaque in a way that I'm going to determine here in just a couple of moments. And so to answer my own question or further my own thought here, what I'm trying to say is, how the hell do we know? No one smoking gun test for plaque. I wish there was, there isn't. It takes a combination of diagnostics, and Dr. Scheinberg's been instrumental in developing this. We use a combination of advanced lipidology, which is what I'm going to talk about in a moment. We use carotid ultrasound, and then we do an EKG, like a 12 leads exercise test. Okay. Let me back up and talk about the lipidology, because this is really important you understand this.
Okay.
So, let's say you walk into a clinic and you have flat stomach, you work out 30, 40 minutes a day, you eat right, you exercise, Mediterranean diet, you don't smoke or drink, you try to get 8 hours of sleep. Okay. Your presentation's good, your risk score is probably low.
Yeah. The sleep part is the.
Yeah, exactly. Who gets that? Maybe a 9-year-old.
Not our law enforcement.
No tax-paying married American gets 8 hours of sleep.
But less so for our first responders or for our law enforcement folks. If they're on 12-hour shifts, they're coming off, they're driving home, they're driving to work, those kinds of things. And the last they're still trying to come down. They don't get 8
Yeah.
hours of sleep.
No, not at all.
Not until they're
that's
retired.
That's really the stress and the sleep is really the X factor. And I'm really out of
Yeah.
my depth on that because there's a lot of research that's being done. It's very compelling. And
Mm.
yeah, so we'll go down that road in a moment. It's pretty interesting stuff. But long story short, the point I'm trying to make in all this is that if you come into that circumstance, you're probably going to leave with a low Framingham risk score. And that's really where the medical continuum kind of stops, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now we know based on the research that we see fit-looking men and women all the time that come through with normal or low cholesterol, good presentations that are young in age and have good habits. Now, how do we know whether or not they're producing plaque? Well, in the early 2000s, late 90s, there was a group of inflammatory biomarkers that were identified. Now, let me explain to you exactly what these are. They are not harmful to you in and of themselves. They're chemical messengers. They're red flags. Okay? Just to give you an example of what this might look like. So, for instance, let's just say you came in and we checked your blood for oxidized LDL, which again is an inflammatory biomarker. What does that mean? It means you're in the early stages of plaque development. Okay. Irrespective of how you look and feel, how many push-ups you can do in 2 minutes, how fast you can run a 2-mile. It means you're in the early stages of plaque development. Okay. If we bring you in and we check your ADMA or SDMA, which is another inflammatory biomarker, we know that there's plaque established there and it can be problematic. So we need to be more aggressive in our therapies. Okay. Now, let's say, for instance, that you come in and we check your blood for LPPLA2. Now, what that means, it's lipoprotein phospholipase enzyme A2. It's a long word, PLA2 for short. Let's keep it.
Okay, got it.
PLA2 for short. That means you have a 20 to 40% chance of developing a heart attack in the next 4 years.
What?
Yes, irrespective of cholesterol, irrespective of fitness, irrespective of age. Okay.
Okay. Because I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Because I also know you like Sigma Tactical Wellness has a whole program to help law enforcement officers, first responders to identify this. And this is a whole part of the protocol, I assume. I'm making a lot of assumptions here that y'all have developed.
Yeah.
So there's this one specific test that can let us know way ahead of I'm going to get this right, the FRS risk score. And that's not standard is what I hear.
Yeah.
Like general GP that you're going to go into, no offense to our GPs, our general GPs that we're going to go into are not going to think, we need to run this test. Or is it even available to run if, once again, somebody doesn't meet the protocols based upon the insurance company?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
I think I got
basically, you've just written the rationale for companies like Sigma, because we build diagnostic bridges. You come in as a police officer and you look great, you're young, you're fit, your LD cholesterol's in check, your Framingham risk score is low, and we find elevated PLA2, you wouldn't have qualified for that test at the primary care level. We start with advanced cardiac care. This is stuff that you usually wouldn't get until after the development of a heart attack. This is where because we don't take chances with it. There's a reason that, again, John Biolani published a document 2018, 2019. It was an all-cause mortality study. And basically, there were a lot of people that were questioning the validity of some of the cardiac all-cause mortality studies and just saying, there's a lot of ways to die as a cop.
There are.
Equally unpleasant.
Yes.
But there's a lot of ways that you can get hurt, maimed, killed in this profession. And it can shorten your life, beyond civilian life expectancy. So what he did, and I believe in 2018, 2019, I was actually sitting in the audience in Miami at the IACP Health and Wellness Symposium. And he said, so we did this study and basically found that of all the police officers in this period of time that we studied that died before civilian life expectancy, 71% of them were cardiac. And I was like, what? And everyone is like sitting there just staring. I'm like, am I the only one that's blown away by this? So I basically raised my hand and made which nobody does.
You're like in the general session, I'm thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's 150
I've been there.
people listening. And he looked at me and he's, yes. And I said, did you say 17 or 71? He said, no, 71% of the cops that died before civilian life expectancy died from cardiac circumstances. He said, that's correct. And I was like, if that is the indication this is a problem, I don't know what is. Now, going back to what I said a moment ago, I'm going to land this plane. So you walk in and you're a cop and you've been a cop for 10 years. This is basically where we start. So we check your blood and we see elevated PLA2. Okay. Now you can take that historically into your clinician's office and say, listen, I've got this lab. I obviously qualify for additional care. What do you want to do? And they look at it like, wow, this is amazing. Where did you get this done? This is specialized cardiac medicine. The problem at primary care, and we love our PCPs,
Yes.
is this is such specialized healthcare. They didn't know how to interpret it. In some cases,
Wow.
they just didn't know, right?
Yes.
This is only available usually at a specialized cardiac care level. So now when we teamed up with TeleMed.EU, who does nationwide telemedicine, you're working directly with a specialist that knows exactly how to deal with this stuff and what to prescribe in the event that you need medication, or can refer you out to somebody in your care network. So now we close the loop and make sure that the patient continuity is there. That's the most important thing, because it's one thing to have data, Cyndi, but it's one thing, and another thing to know what to do with it. And so that's where it's very specific. Now, going back to the use of the diagnostic. So let's go back to the beginning of what we talked about. You come in with elevated PLA2. Well, in a lot of cases, those like for instance, your husband's heart attack, identified early on, there is a high likelihood that a $5 medication could have prevented that entirely.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the use of statins. Now, statins are obviously cholesterol-lowering drugs, but they're also anti-inflammatory. So they have the capacity of healing that endothelial lamina, that Teflon, before it has the opportunity of hosting plaque.
Wow.
Okay? And I'll give you a couple of examples of what
you
that
regrow the Teflon.
Correct. Yeah, it heals it over, right? And the way I had it explained to me, which made the most sense, was like you can think of that inflammation and creation of lesions and the damage that endothelial lamina can sometimes experience, like chapped lips, but on the insides of a vessel. And that medication has the tendency to act like chapstick. It heals it over.
I love that.
Before it's beautiful, for an opportunity of hosting plaque. So, this is something that we've seen work in John's office. And so hypothetically, we've seen this. So for instance, like, this is cutting edge. It's all hypothetical. And so we wanted some data, and we've seen this work in John's office. He's a board certified cardiologist, and he's had a lot of experience doing this. And we've seen this work at police departments all over the United States. But we didn't know if those police departments, maybe it was an anomaly. Anecdotally, it looks great, Cyndi, but like, medicine and the status of practice is not going to change based on anecdotes. Like we need studies. We need peer-reviewed studies. So here's what we did, and this is going to blow your mind. So in March of last year, we published a document, and what it showed was as follows. We took 10,000 charts from all over the country, and we selected just over 3,000 of them at random. Okay. Now these were taken from Everett, Washington, to St. Johns County, Florida. Yeah. And everywhere in between. Okay. Male, female, all ethnicities, all manner of years of service and occupations within public safety. Okay. And we picked 3,300, I believe, somewhere along in there, over 3,000. Now, what did you have to have in order to have your chart be selected at random? As all you had to have was a low to intermediate Framingham risk score. Okay. Now, if you remember, that means you got like a 10 to 15% chance of a heart attack in the next decade. Right. Okay. And I don't know about you, but you tell me I got a 10 to 15% chance of anything,
I ain't worried.
Thinking about it again.
No.
What we did is we looked for the presence of LPPLA2, which is that marker that indicates plaque burden. And not only plaque burden, but vulnerable, soft plaque burden. Okay. Yes. Now, remember, having elevated PLA2 means you have a 20 to 40% chance of developing a heart attack in the next 4 years. It's very serious. Very. And we wanted to know how many of those people with a low to intermediate Framingham risk score had high PLA2. Basically, were identified as low risk when they were high risk. Yes, and? Good question. So we hypothesized. That's what I feel like, 20 or 30%. I would have been happy with 20 or 30%. That was when I would have, wow, if I'm potentially saving 2 or 3 out of 10 lives,
it matters.
Matters.
It's a lot, actually.
It turned out to be 92%.
No, 92%?
Yeah. And we published that in the Journal of Occupational Environmental Medicine in March of 2024.
Do y'all hear that? Y'all heard that, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like, and I know there's probably a lot of people in the audience that are civilians, and they're like, wait a second, hold on. All right, maybe the traditional risk scoring system is just not good. Maybe it thought that it doesn't work for cops. Maybe it just doesn't work, period. So would you compare that to civilians? And the answer is yes, we did. and we only miss 24%.
Oh my gosh.
So
This is
92% versus 4.
this is huge. So where do we line up to that's what I know, like every officer and spouse listening to this or whoever else is listening to this, it's all my first responders, but like my law enforcement is my primary, right? They're all sitting there going, if it's a spouse, where do I send my officer so they can go get this test done and we can check and we can see? So how do we do this? What do we do to get these indicators so people know sooner? So it's one less thing that we have to worry about. Like
Yeah.
I am so like super emotional about this because I'm like 92% is huge.
Yeah.
And to think about being able to like to go from I don't have to worry about it to holy shit, I need to be worrying about this is huge. And for the impact of the families and the lives that they miss out on, not just
Yeah.
right. Okay. So
And the problem is,
What-
it
what do
really
we
kinda
do?
compound. It really
what do we do, Ben?
You go to www.ioc. I'm kidding.
I mean, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
One of my questions that I wrote down is where do we get these tests and how soon do people need to be looking at this? Because
Well,
we know as law enforcement families that this is a big problem.
Yeah.
We know that there's talk about it, but there's not the stats that you just gave.
Right.
And those
that's
stats are
again,
life
it's-
changing.
And it's getting worse. We're seeing in populations of 20 to 25-year-olds, we're seeing 16% of those individuals with early onset plaque development. So this is something that's starting much earlier than we really even knew about. And of course, I guess
Wow.
the X factor is the stress and just the culture and climate in which these officers find
Right.
every day. But aside from that, in terms of some other interesting stuff, and I'll go back to where you can do this, what you can do in just a moment. But the thing I really want to bring your attention to is that this problem is not going away. We're seeing higher rates of people with preclinical CAD than the ones that have been diagnosed with it. And that means there's a tidal wave offshore that's headed this way. I don't know when it's going to get here, how big it is, but it's coming.
Wow.
It's really incredible in some of the things that we've seen in the way we've been able to intervene in circumstances that I think would have been completely overlooked if they'd gone through traditional routes of interventive medicine. And so part of what Sigma does is on-site cardiac screening, and it uses those 3 diagnostics. We work with hundreds of agencies every year all over the country. We're active in 41, 42 states. And, as a matter of fact, there's states that I've actually assisted with drafting some legislature. Maine's a perfect example. So Maine just launched an initiative for cardiac screening. And I worked through Maine Municipal Association, Rebecca Graham, up there to draft some legislature. Noel March was also incredibly instrumental in doing that. And he is a former U.S. Marshal from that area, worked with us a while as strategic advisor. And we've now created a $2 million fund. It was actually generated from leftovers from cannabis revenues in the state of Maine for cardiac screening. And this is not just for line level patrol officers. This is for everyone that operates in the public safety space. Give you an example. With patrol officers, usually they're younger, not always. We're seeing like 36% PLA2 positivity. For dispatch communications, it's 30%, so it's pretty high, just based on the nature and the stress of that job. Firefighters, 58%, which cardiac disease remains to be the chief line of duty cause of death for a firefighter. They're all worried about cancer.
Wow.
And granted, I don't want to get cancer either. It's incredibly unpleasant. But looking at the causes of death for line
They
of
need to
duty,
be worried about heart attacks.
right? Heart attack is way at the top of the list. Now, what's crazy? Corrections, 81% PLAP positive.
So I corrections does not get enough attention. And I think that job is super stressful in the environment that they're in. And so that doesn't surprise me that they're high.
Wild. It's wildly high.
81%.
81%. Yeah. As a matter of fact, a lot of that data was derived on the western side of the United States, which is by and large a lot healthier than the central United States. It is south. Great state of Texas. Obesity rate amongst law enforcement, 81%. We've got some big issues here in the great state of Texas. But when you look at that data, typically on average, it's just natural health statistics. Washington, Colorado, Northern California, Oregon, they're leading the pack in terms of just resources available to improve longevity and wellness in general. But we're still seeing significant rates of PLA2 positivity amongst law enforcement. We work with the state of Oregon State Police. And it was incredible over a multi-year study, what we saw up there. But here's the cool thing is cops are amazing listeners.
Yes, they are.
Incredible uptake in reductions in cardiac risk once they've gone through the program, whether it's with us, which it
Awesome.
normally is, or with a primary care provider. We did a multi-year study with Well County, Colorado.
Okay.
And what was amazing is we started out with 49.5% PLA2 positivity rate. 3 years later, it's 17.5%.
What? See, so this is something that can be addressed, which
It
is
absolutely can be addressed.
it's encouraging because then it's not, hey, you're walking into a death sentence.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
so if we know, if you can change it, if you can empower yourself to make these
Yes.
changes. And when I think about my law enforcement folks, and as far as spouses, you know this too, like the more we can empower them to feel like they have control of something, it's going to help them not just physically, but mentally too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that you travel around, you contract with departments, agencies, those kinds of things. If somebody's listening and they want to get a hold of you, or they're thinking, oh my gosh, I have a grant, or do they need to have that funding up front before they contact you, or just contact you?
Yeah, really contact us. And we've
Okay.
got some grants that we work with, really paid out. We're actually working with a potential. This is just some down the road. This is something we'd really like to see it added to the Limbaugh grant, which is the Department of Justice, to the COPS office.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Garrison East Foundation has been amazing.
Awesome.
They've actually covered this in a number of circumstances, but there's a lot of grants locally through health facilities, health foundations. As a matter of fact, a small agency in central Arizona was Paradise Valley, and they've got a local hospital foundation that provides them grant funding.
Awesome.
And then the other thing we're seeing now is uptake by health insurance companies. We've had a 10 to 11 year relationship with the Colorado Intergovernmental Risk Sharing Agency, CIRSA. They covered 4/5 of this on behalf of their member agencies, Alliant up in the Northeast. So we're starting to see significant uptake because of the costs associated with this.
That's the thing, is wouldn't it make sense to do this up front? And then you don't have the millions of dollars, billions
Loss of
probably,
life.
of
Yeah.
loss of life payouts.
Yeah.
That just makes sense. It doesn't take that much. It doesn't sound like
It's a
the
no-brainer.
tests themselves are not like super invasive.
Let's call
It's
it
just
what it is. It's a no-brainer. The Council of
no-brainer,
International
yeah.
Law Enforcement Agencies, they did some studies, some actuarial studies on the costs of heart disease and heart attack. And this is
Yeah.
a survivable event, by the way. This is not a fatality, which in and of
Yes.
itself has an innumerable price tag. But
Ugh.
maybe between $450,000 to $700,000 per event, that an $800 screening can identify in a $5 medication in some cases.
That's ridiculous.
Most of the time, a lot of the Cyndi is in their sphere of control. There's some supplementation, potentially 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams omega-3. And John's done incredible work on that. That's an OTC. And
Yeah.
reduction, improvements in body composition, reductions in coping mechanisms, alcohol, tobacco. And that was one thing that we saw in county start talking about heart disease. And it's, what am I doing that's contributing to this within my sphere of control?
Yes.
And
Yes.
smokeless tobacco is huge in law enforcement because you can't smoke
Yes.
a police car. We saw like 70.3% of the population of users reported a significant reduction, and half that 70% reported quitting altogether after going through. We don't even talk about this. We're not here doing smoke cessation modules. We're just talking about the causes of heart disease, and chief among them is tobacco usage. And they were like, I didn't realize it. We're like, yeah. So the way we try to communicate this to people is very matter of fact, and cops love that. They gravitate towards it. It puts them in the driver's seat, where now they have a place to start, and they have a destination and a goal. And
Yes.
for them, it's so uniform. They're so strategic and processorial that the way we lay it out, it gives them hope and power and direction. And that's a very powerful combination of circumstances.
I think another thing you give them is a reality check.
Yeah.
Because that's many times it's not going to happen to me, right? I'm not old. I'm not overweight. I'm not like that guy or that girl. Science matters, right?
Yeah.
The stats, the science matters. I have learned that working with law enforcement folks. If I give them the science behind something or the research study, then they're going to go, oh. And so you giving them the science and the research and being able to say, and there's a test that we can do that shows where you are. That to me shows hard facts, Hard
Yeah.
facts. Here you go. Now,
I'll tell you,
what are you going to do about it?
I'll tell you what's actually funny is I haven't had my blood drawn in a very long time, and I don't like doctors. We actually had a new insurance product with work, and my wife, who worked for us at that point, she said, "You haven't had any labs drawn in quite a while, and they're going to need some updated labs before they can issue you coverage." And I was like, "Okay." Last time I did, I was 27 years old. It was perfect. So why ever do it? So I'm literally in the gym. Now I work out 6 days a week. Body composition is 11%. I take my health and fitness very seriously. Been athletic all my life, from baseball to rodeo to mountain biking and everything in between. And I'm in my home gym, working out, doing pull-ups. My wife walks in with a computer and says, "Look at this lab." And I looked down and I was like, "That's ugly." She goes, "That's yours." My heartbeat too was through the roof. And I called John, sent him the lab, and I said, "What do I do?" And this was on a Thursday. He goes, "I'll see you Monday." And so I went into his office, and he issued me 40 milligrams of Dorvastatin, and I've been taking it for a year. And now my PLA2 is almost half of what it was before. But here's the thing, Cyndi, is this is really where I'd like to end and really put the onus back on the individual, because I'm 40, at the time I was 41 years of age, in kind of the best shape of my life. But here's the situation. I'm stressed out, and I've got a genetic predisposition to heart disease.
Yep.
And let me tell you something. When you take somebody like me that has a genetic predisposition to heart disease and you put them behind the badge, it's like pouring water on a grease fire. And so we have to identify these individuals at a young age. It was a shock to me. I remember I presented that FBI in a command college in Connecticut, and I got shocked up when I showed them that. I was like, it's hard to talk about now just because it's such a passion. And I thought, like, I got a 40% chance of developing a heart attack. And of course, John, at the time we hadn't been acquired. This is 2 years ago almost. I said, "So I have to take this medication?" And he goes, "Yes. And don't be one of those guys that you always complain about that thinks you can run or diet your way out of it, because that's not going to be the case. You will probably take this the rest of your life, but it beats the alternative." And I have. And it's been a game changer. And so not only am I the hair club for men
Poster child,
but I'm also a client. So I take my own medicine. And so it's been an amazing experience. I'm very blessed to work with a group of individuals that we work with. They're the best listeners ever. And John will tell you the best patients. And so for us, this is less an occupation. It's a passion. It's a mission. And it's something we take very seriously. And God willing, this is something we'll continue to do for a very long period of time.
if there is an individual that wants to get this done, maybe the department's super small. Maybe they're not motivated to do something like this. How does an individual take the initiative to do something like this? Can they?
They can, yeah. So this is something you can work through with us.
Okay.
We have a direct consumer sort of package, if you will, that provides the lab, the phlebotomy, and then which is the most important part, right? What do I do with this information? How do I interpret this? Where do I do? Where do I go? Yeah. Do I need medication? Can I get, so that specialty aftercare is packaged in with it. Okay.
Perfect.
Now, in a number of cases, you can do primary care. They will potentially pull it for you, but normally you have to go through a specialized conduit like Sigma Tactical Wellness. But we do have the ability of doing that through our partner and parent TeleMed.
Man. Okay. So guys, if you're listening, you're probably on your device, probably not sitting on your laptop. You're sitting on a device of some kind right now. And in the show notes, hit the link below, hit the little arrow. It'll pull up the show notes. I will have the link to the website there where you can, if this is something, if it's something that maybe you want to look into, that was a little bit of sarcasm, like you better. So go to their website, check it out, check out the information. You heard Dr. Stone, you have the stats, you know what's, and by the way, I didn't know he was going to share all these stats with me, and I'm super passionate about this now. So you have all the stats, you have the science, you just need to know where you are in that science. And you can connect with them and take this initiative, take it for your family. If you're a spouse and you are concerned, send this podcast to your officer. If you are a family member, send it to your people that matter, that you want to protect. We can't protect them all the time, but this is something that they can protect themselves. Be a nag. If you got to be a nag, be a nag. You use passive aggressive. I don't know what you're going to do, but make sure.
That sounds more like a threat than an encouragement.
So this is something, because I knew that heart was a problem. My husband was on high blood pressure, And I used to tell them, you know what, that's fine. If you die, I'll just have retirement with somebody else and you won't get, somebody else will be having
Gonna
me
live
and
to be
not you.
120.
Right? So there you go. Guys, this is really important. This is important information. Share this with your department, share this with your peer support, share this with your administration. Let them know that this is available and that it can help make a healthier department and agency for yourself so that y'all can have long lives together and have more retirement than you do line of service.
Yeah.
That is it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to hit here? Because I think I hit it all.
Nail on the head.
Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Guys, like I said, forward this along. That's my payoff. Go check out the website, code4couples.com, to potentially find other podcasts that might be helpful. And until then, next time, y'all keep it Code 4. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about the podcast or Cyndi, check out code4couples.com. All intellectual property rights owned by CRLD2 Ventures, LLC, are protected by the firm of 9mm, 45 ACP, 5.56mm, and 12 gauge.